This is You're Probably Right. Entertainment first, everything else is just bonus. Opinions, all ours. Sometimes backed by research, but never the final word. There are always exceptions, so take it with a grain of salt and a slight dusting of chili powder.
How you doing, y'all? This is MCM, and you're listening to You're Probably Right podcast. You know, I really appreciate my listeners and those of you who've been around for a while, and those of you who have just maybe figured out about this podcast. I really appreciate all of you. That's pretty much what I'm saying. I'm just kind of just being funny. Um, it's been a while. We're at episode 331. To be exact. Well, not really to be exact. It's more like 340 or something like that. But officially 331. Um, it's been a long ride. This podcast has definitely helped me to face a lot of can I say idiosyncrasies in my existence. Um, Different ways that I'm different and ways that I'm the same as so many people that I might look up to or look down upon, depending on what period of my life you might talk about. And not that I really look down on people too often. It's just, you get these. I think anytime you talk down about somebody, even to yourself, you're looking down at somebody at some level. Because how dare you, right? Who are you? Anyhow, that's just some wild, deep thoughts I guess I was having. Anyhow, check it out. When hunger overrules judgment. Remember, this is You're Probably Right podcast, and all of my episodes are for entertainment purposes only. This is not a Christian podcast, but it is a podcast by a Christian, meaning that a lot of my views will definitely come from that end, but at the same time, a lot of the time I'm just riffing, almost like if somebody would write in their diary, you know, they'd probably write some fact, some things they've learned, some things they feel, some things they've experienced. So that's kind of what this podcast is, and that's why I don't like to say, even if I believe I'm actually teaching, um, and sometimes I do it in a so-called ignorant way. Not that I curse or anything like that on here at all, but I'm just saying stuff. You know what I mean? And that's why when I like I treat something like the Word of God very, very sacred, very, very holy, and I don't believe that I've been called, nor have I been shown approved to say teach. You know what I mean? So that's why, and I don't want to lead anybody astray or down the garden path, as they say, because I'm saying something that's nonsensical. So anything that sounds stupid, you're probably right. And if it sounds smart, well, you're probably right again. We'll just go from there anyhow. When hunger overrules judgment, how a mark is made. Remember what our term mark means, guys. And I'm not going to be flashing them on the screen. For those of you on Spotify, I did my first slide type video. My last episode, 330. You might want to check it out, but I can tell you honestly, it got exhausting in making it. So therefore, it probably ended up sloppy at some point. I've been this person since I've always been this way, where sometimes I value getting something done than getting it done right at times. And not that I don't want to get it. I end up spending so much time on the wrong things. So it's not that I'm doing it in a lazy way. It's just I exhaust myself in doing it the very prudent and conscientious way, so much so that I overdo it. And hopefully, if you understand what I mean, you understand. And if you don't, well, sorry. All right. Listen, there's a difference between being used and becoming usable. That's where I want to start, because the last talk was about users and marks. It was about how certain people study bait, study bait, ration, confuse, and feed on someone else's hunger. But this talk is about the other side of it, not the user, the person who becomes vulnerable to the setup in the first place. I don't want to frame this as good people getting fooled. That's too flattering, too soft, too incomplete, and honestly, just too much of a lie. This is about what happens when hunger gets strong enough to override judgment, when desire starts negotiating with what self-respect should have honestly disqualified from the beginning. When somebody sees enough to know better and still keeps moving towards the thing that is pulling them out. That's the real subject. Because not everybody becomes a mark the same way. Some people get caught through loneliness, some through vanity, some through admiration, some through money, some through the fantasy of being chosen by somebody they think that is above them or out of their league. But I think one of the strongest ways this happens is lust. You see, that's when people sin in this world. When we are drawn out of our own lust, that sinful nature, that lustful nature that's already in our flesh. Not just sexual desire by itself. Lust mixed with scarcity. Lust mixed with low self-worth. Lust mixed with time pressure. Lust mixed with the thought that this may be your last or best shot at something you really, really want. And that's when it's dangerous. Because then the person is no longer just attracted. They are invested in the possibility that this might be it. And once that thought gets inside of them, they start making every expensive, they start making very, expensive excuses. I swear I'm dyslexic. The first lie usually is not even dramatic. It sounds reasonable. It sounds like this. Maybe they're into me. Maybe this could really become something. Maybe they'll like me as much as I like them once they know me better. Maybe I'm tired of looking around and this is finally the one. Maybe I won't get somebody like this again. Maybe this is a once in a lifetime situation. Maybe I'm punching above my weight class and I'd better not ruin it. That's the lie. And notice how that lie works. It doesn't have to prove anything real in the present. It only has to convince the person that the opportunity is rare enough that they should tolerate what they would normally reject. Right from the beginning, I was going to say. And that is how judgment starts getting moved aside. Not all at once, but just enough. And think that kind of person, well, no. Yeah, I would say, yeah. And the kind of person most vulnerable to this It's not just somebody who's simply weak. It is the person who believes they are running out of time. And that matters a lot because once someone thinks time is short, they stop weighing things properly. They stop seeing disrespect and disqualifying things they should be disqualifying right from the start and seeing it at the cost of admission. They stop seeing inconsistencies as information and start seeing it as something to work around or work for or work through. They stop protecting their time because they are afraid of losing what they think may be their only chance. And that's the trap. Fear of running out of time makes people tolerate time theft. Weird. And that is one of the first things they usually start tolerating: disrespect of their time and inconsistency. Not being pursued cleanly, not being responded to cleanly, not being handled with steadiness, not being met with anything that suggests real attention or intention. And because they want the thing badly, they start telling themselves smaller lies just to keep going. They say, well, they have a life too. Or maybe they're just busy. Or maybe they're not like me. Maybe if they get to know me better, they'll value me more. Or maybe once they see what I see, they'll care the way I care. And that is one of the most dangerous lies in the whole entire pattern. Because now the person is no longer dealing with who is in front of them. They are dealing with a projected future version of that same person. They are no longer asking, what are they doing? They are asking, how do I earn better treatment later? Yeah, that is where self-betrayal starts organizing itself. Because the deeper flaw under all of it is usually not just desire. It's low self-worth and patience. Low self-worth says, maybe I don't usually get chosen like this, or maybe this is rare for me, or maybe I should tolerate more than I should or would because this is all above my level and like, what else am I going to do? And impatience says, I don't want to wait. I don't want to be content where I am. I don't want to trust that value can meet value in the right place at some time, another year or a few months down the line, or 10 years from now. I want it now. That combination is very dangerous. Low self-worth lowers the standard. Impatience speeds up the process. And lust supplies the energy to the whole situation. And once those three are working together, the person starts getting drawn and swayed by their own appetites deep inside them. This is the point where responsibility begins. And I don't place that line late, I place it early because the cleanest point of responsibility is at first sight. And people might say, oh, yeah, obviously, but nobody actually feels that way. But it's like, no, for real. Somewhere in the Bible it says, resist the devil and he will flee. So soon as you feel the inkling to do it, you have to flee. If you don't flee, you're going to fall. At first sight, you still have the easiest exit. At first sight, you can still step back. At first sight, the current has not yet become a wave. But once you keep once you keep staring at that, keep hoping, keep building internal permission around the attraction, lust stops being just a feeling and starts becoming a current. And when it becomes a wave, it begins to carry you. And that is when people start free falling into possibly an undercurrent. And you know what happens if your undercurrent takes you. And what is the first outward sign that they are that wave, or they are in that wave? Because it's kind of funny the way waves go. If you ever gone swimming in the ocean or lake or whatever it is, and once it starts swaying with you, you realize you literally have no control. And it's like you become the wave. If something was in, say the wave was hitting something, if you're there and you're in the wave, you're going to hit, if it's the boat or whatever, the side of something, you're going to hit it just as hard as the wave does because you become the wave. I don't think it's chasing first. I think it's self-editing under imagined loss. And that is the sign. The person starts acting as though they already have something they could lose, even though nothing solid has been established. They begin editing themselves to keep from losing somebody who isn't even half as invested as they are. That means they start softening themselves, censoring themselves, withholding questions, hiding standards, acting easier than they really are, acting cooler than they really are, trying not to say the thing that could cost them the person. And the fact that they know that could already lose them the person, they should realize that is not their person. And that is when the imbalance stops being merely external and starts becoming internal cooperation. Your insides are cooperating against you. How can you win? And what do they edit first? Usually anything they think the other person would see as a red flag or a deal breaker. Maybe it's a preference. Maybe it's a standard. Maybe it's something about how they dress, how they eat, how they live, how they talk, what they want, what they won't allow. They start trimming themselves into a more acceptable version, a more marketable version, a version they think will be harder to reject. Maybe you got to go with the flow. And that's already bad enough. But then comes the deeper corruption. Once they start realizing that even the edited version of themselves still may not be enough, what do? Well, I mean, what can you do? You start to try and purchase care. Not always with money, though sometimes with money. Also with compliance, with sexual over offerings, with excessive patience, with emotional labor, with silence, with acceptance of things they would normally reject, with gifts, with over availability, with strategic generosity. At that point, it's no longer pursuit. It is transaction. And I think the clearest sign that this is happening is when they repeat an overgiving act they already knew was wrong from the first time. And that is the line, because the first time they may still be confused. The first time they may still be conflicted. The first time they may be even, they may come away and say, I don't know why I did that. And I'm not doing that again. That made no sense. But then they do it again anyway. And then the problem is no longer lack of information. At that point, better judgment has been overruled and thrown out the window. And now they're not just trying to love. They're trying to buy access. And once you're trying to buy access, you already are far from dignity. This is why I say this is not mainly a story about innocence. It's a story about what's in a person, or what in a person becomes willing to bargain against itself. And that bargaining does not usually stop because somebody reasoned their way out. A lot of the time it stops because they hit rock bottom. Humiliation. You ever been humiliated? I guarantee you, if you have, and it hurts to this day, it probably popped up before you. And that's where you are usually when you hit rock bottom. And I don't mean mild embarrassment. I mean the kind of humiliation that becomes too plain to dress up anymore. That kind where the other person no longer even bothers to hide the contempt. Because to try to actually humiliate someone means you hold them in great contempt. Are you in contempt of that person? The kind where they say things in effect that amount to, yes, I got what I wanted. Yes, you gave it. Yes, I did what I did. And too bad for you. Sometimes it comes down to a line as simple as brutal as, do you think I care? And usually you do not need much past that, because once that level of open indifference appears, the fantasy can no longer defend itself cleanly. You're done. The person is forced to face that what has been true for a while. They were not chosen. They were tolerated while they were useful. And that is the first hard truth. I was only tolerated while I was useful. And once my usefulness dropped, the tolerance dropped with it. It's kind of like a woman who, maybe a guy decides he wants to have a baby with her for whatever reason. Maybe she's beautiful, so he thinks he's going to have beautiful kids, or they're going to have a certain complexion, or maybe they're going to have certain textured hair or colored eyes or whatever it is, or they just another conquest. But for many guys who do that, or for many women who are that for some guys, when if they pass that period, or for whatever reason they're unable to conceive, that guy is going to drop her like a bad habit and move on to the next one, if that's what his intention is. That truth hurts because it strips away the flattering interpretation. It reveals that what felt like possibility was often just utility wearing a warmer face. And once that truth lands, the person has to ask much harder questions. Not about the user, but about themselves. What should I have valued more from the beginning? And the answer is self-respect. Not chemistry, not attraction, not rarity, not fantasy, not the thrill of being chosen by somebody I wanted. Self-respect. Because connection and love are not things that can be successfully worked for in the way desperate people try to work for them. They have to be freely given to be sound. If something comes too cheaply, maybe it's not reverent. But if it has to be overworked, overbought, overperformed, or over-endured, then it was probably never going to be real love from the person, no matter what you did. And that is the lesson. Not everything you can chase should be chased. Not everything that excites you should be trusted. Not everything you can almost get is meant to be yours. And that is why the spine of this whole talk is simple. Once lust gets you negotiating with what self-respect should have disqualified, you're already in danger. And that is the line, because the real trouble does not begin when the other person disrespects you. It begins when you start negotiating with the disrespect because you want the outcome more than you want to obey what you already actually know. That is when the trap gets you and they got your cooperation. This is why I don't think the answer is just watch for red flags. That's too shallow. People don't need only more signs. They need more honesty about their own hunger. They need to ask, what in me still thinks time is running out? What in me still thinks this person might be my last shot? What in me still mistakes rare for valuable? What in me still thinks attraction can compensate for inconsistency? What in me still believes I can earn care from somebody who is only tolerating me while I'm useful to them? And that is the real work. Because until those questions are faced, a person can know every sign in the world and still walk straight into them, the same kind of trap under a different or with a different face. And that can leave you for years spinning your heels, and if anything, going backwards in life. And I think that is the hardest part of this, really. The hardest part is not realizing that the other person was shallow, selfish, lustful, manipulative, or or indifferent. The hardest part is realizing how much of your own inner world had to participate to keep things going. Your fantasy had to participate. Your impatience had to participate. Your low self-worth had to participate. Your fear of missing out had to participate. Your refusal to wait had to participate. Your willingness to edit yourself had to participate. And once you see that, the whole issue becomes sobering. Your fantasy had to participate. Your impatience had to participate. Your low self-esteem had to participate. Your fear of missing out on something had to participate. Your refusal to have patience. Your willingness to change things that you would normally say a different way had to participate. When you would usually maybe say no, you say, well, I don't know. You preface it with the I don't. Even though who else would know if you don't know? Because it's all about you, right? What you would say and other things. And once you see that, the whole issue is just wild. It's just there, it's just in front of you. It's just the question of, are you going to grasp the things that you've allowed to happen and realize and say, you know what, I'm not doing that anymore. Now, it's not just about avoiding bad people. Now it's about refusing to become the kind of person who can be pulled that far just by your appetite for whatever it is. And that is the harder teaching. And it's also a more useful one when you think about it. Because once a person really learns this, they stop misreading tolerance as affection. They stop treating inconsistency as some sort of mystery. They stop calling time theft complicated. They stop trying to buy what must and is generally freely given. They stop handing over pieces of themselves in exchange for hope later. You're more than a piece of money, and the list goes on. You're more than a body. You're more than a bodyguard. And most importantly, they stop negotiating away their self-respect for the fantasy of being chosen. That is the real change, Not bitterness, not cynicism, not pretending desire no longer exists, but discipline. The ability to feel hunger without obeying it blindly. The ability to want something without lowering yourself for it. The ability to recognize that some doors are exciting and some doors that are exciting precisely because they should stay closed. The ability to let attraction remain attraction instead of letting it become argument, permission, surrender. That's maturity. And if somebody listening to this has already lived this humiliation part already, I mean, humiliation can bring you to that point where, the other person has already made it clear that they don't care. They already had to admit that they were only tolerated while useful. Then hear this clearly. Don't waste humiliation. At least, at least let it teach you something. Let it teach you where you first started bargaining. Remember it. Let it teach you where your self-worth got soft. Let it teach you where your patience broke. Let it teach you where lust became more important than actual truth. Let it teach you what you were trying to work for that was never going to be freely given from that person in the first place. Because humiliation by itself does not improve a person. It's just humiliation. It can just as easily make them bitter, performative, cold, reckless, or more desperate the next time. What improves a person is what they learn from that humiliation. So learn the right thing. Learn that if you have to keep editing yourself, it's already wrong. Learn that if you keep overgiving against your own judgment and it's hurting you, it's already wrong. Learn that if you are tolerating disrespect of your time because you think time is running out, you're already in danger. Learn that if you are trying to prove your value to someone who could only who would only care once it benefits them, you are standing in the wrong place beside the wrong person at the wrong time. Learn that what has to be worked for, well, if you have to work that hard, it was probably never going to be yours anyway. Not from that person. And if you remember nothing else from this conversation, guys, as I said, you could be hanging out with me. We could be just walking along the side of the beach in the sand, or walking a dog, or driving side by side down a long highway. Hallway, imagine. Remember this. Once lust gets you negotiating with what self-respect should have disqualified, you're already in danger. And that is how a mark is made. Not by ignorance alone, not by bad luck alone, not by somebody else's appetite alone, but by hunger, strong enough to make a person stop obeying what they already know about someone else. And that is the making of a mark. And the way out is not to stop feeling, not to become cold. It's just to stop bargaining with yourself. Because, guys, at the end of the day, y'all are smarter than you give yourselves credit for. It's just intelligence isn't going to necessarily make you or have you make the right choice, right? Because we have these things that pull at us like lust, hunger, lust, desire for different things. Anyhow, y'all, this is a short one today. That's anyhow. I was gonna Michael Scott that. Anyhow, thanks for hanging out with me again. Again, I'm always begging y'all, I know. Send me an email, yprpodcast@gmail.com. Maybe there's something you want me to talk about. Maybe there's something you want me to stop saying. Yeah, I'm just joking. I'm not gonna stop though. But anyway, yeah, you can reach out to the podcast. Please share it. Um, Views are starting to go to a respectful place that I've been hoping for a while. I don't know if it's because I'm doing new things or just getting better at doing the old things. Anyhow, regardless, I'm happy and I thank you for hanging out with me. Take care of yourself. CMC, I'm out. Yo. Hey, come check out You Probably Right podcast. Society is getting more unpredictable every day, but at the same time, predictable in its unpredictability. Say that 4 times real fast. Come with me as I attempt to find clarity in all the fog while staying way outside the box and kicking the box way down the road with my size 12 ducks. I use the Bible, experience, education, fortune, misfortune, life's lessons, life's mistakes to sort through all the mess. I talk about news, God, God, self help, sports, sickness, health, music, parenting, love, humbleness, hurt, pain, joy, and all the things that might make you say, I never thought of it that way. Hopefully, anyway. Also, I take a stab at answering tough and not so tough questions, and all the while, understand that, listen, sometimes you end up in the hot seat and there's no thermostat. Well, that's how it is here. And because there's no topic, well, very few topics off the table, Torontonians will understand that Doug Ford reference there. Hopefully, the podcast will be helpful and uplifting. And hey, maybe you'll find your own private Idaho here somewhere. Hope to see you soon.